So welcome everyone to Pause and Pivot, our Cafecito Chat space where we explore the science and soul of meaningful living through books, reflection, and shared conversation. I'm Margarita V, and today we're diving into a fascinating and deeply important book. It's called Brain Energy by Dr. Christopher Palmer. And the question is, what if mental health is far more connected to our everyday lives, our daily habits, much more than we realize? Thinking about things like sleep and stress and food, metabolism, even our nervous system regulation, and so many more things. Christopher Palmer is showing us that all of these factors and more play a much larger role in emotional well-being than we've traditionally understood. So today we're going to be exploring three major ideas from this book. Number one, the idea that mental disorders may actually be metabolic disorders of the brain. So we'll go into that. Number two, how lifestyle habits can function as powerful forms of brain medicine. And number three, why purpose, connection, and supportive environments matter so deeply for human flourishing. And if you've been enjoying these Cafecito Chats, we'd love for you to like and subscribe and join us each week as we continue exploring new books and ideas that we connect together to support more intentional and flourishing lives. And stay with us through the end of today's conversation because we're also going to be sharing a hot tip sheet inspired by the book with practical gut-brain lifestyle tips and wellness practices that you can begin exploring right away. So today, before we dive in, we have a special guest joining our Cafecito Chat. Today, I'd love to introduce my very special friend, Maricel Rocha. Maricel is a dear friend who I've known for many years. She is a health extension specialist with a background in biochemistry, biotechnology, cancer research, and personalized wellness. And her work focuses basically on helping people better understand the connections between metabolism and things like stress, aging, brain health, and long-term well-being, which makes her such a wonderful fit for today's conversation around this book, Brain Energy. And what I especially appreciate about Maricel's work is that she brings together both science and our lived experiences in a very human and compassionate way. So Maricel, we're really happy to welcome you today to our thoughtful little Cafecito Chat circle. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Maggie. This is amazing. And I have my cafecito here with me. Already and excited.
Awesome. And we love to also have water for those that are ready for sipping on water. Thank you so much for being here. And let's just check in with our other co-hosts, Colin and Gordon. What's one idea you guys are inspired to get into discussion today?
I loved how it takes the stigma, how this book takes the stigma of mental unhealth out of like the wrongness, the shame, the badness of it all, and helps us see and frame it as this is actually a metabolic function, and that it's much more than just failure on behalf of the human system.
Perfect. Love it. Welcome, Colin. Always great to see you and to look for that fresh perspective. And Gordon, hello, welcome.
Hello, great to be here, Maggie, and great to have Maricel with us as well as and Colin. I have to say, Maggie, that somehow you pick the books that are exactly what I need on that day. I don't know how this happens, but I just came back from my medical exam and looked at the fact that I've been pre-diabetic, and now suddenly I've gotten to the diabetic level. I've been eating terribly. My sleep has not been good. My stress levels have been high. And my wife has tons of problems with her gastrointestinal process that create all kinds of havoc. So it's like this guy just gave me the map of what we need to be doing. I mean, it's like phenomenal. And I am so focused on that right now because I know it felt like just exactly what I need to change are those kinds of habits. And it's just like I'm really excited for this conversation. And thank you for your intuition about what I need each week.
That's how we show up here, Gordon. We continue the conversation. And thank you so much for all of those shares. We know that you're just landing back home and you guys are getting resettled. And, welcome to the human race. We live with constant changes and stressors. And we're now meeting up with the reality of how lifestyle and our daily habits are truly impacting us, not only physically, but mentally, spiritually, and, as a community. So, so grateful for your commitment to show up, open-mindedness to explore the different books, and honoring, as we're focusing this month on, it's May, so it's mental health awareness. But we're looking at, we love and support mental health. And you know what? We believe that mental fitness is the way to stay there. So we're exploring different topics, different ways. And as this amazing author, Christopher Palmer, who I had the pleasure of meeting in Boston just a couple weeks ago, he signed my book, you guys. And I felt like it was a sacrilege because he actually signed it and now it's like written all over. See, he signed it. And I told him I'm going to be underlining it. And he's like, go for it. So thank you, Dr. Palmer. It was amazing meeting you. And guys, we're going to dive into the book in just a minute to go and introduce you to the book overview and introduce you into the author. But just to let you know, this is not a self-help book. This is not something you're going to read in 2 hours and as you're sipping your special drink. This is a research-based book, chock full of scientific evidence-based research from decades and decades of work. It's 20 pages of scientific research articles that he's included in the back. So this is amazing for physicians, doctors, nurses, health coaches, anyone who really is interested in getting into the science behind the scenes, and people who are super ready and motivated to make those lifestyle transitions. So it took me about 9 hours to read. So that's a when it gets to 9 or 10 hours, it's kind of like a heavy duty, but a must read for anyone who is alive. So with that, let's go ahead and get ready. We'll just get into a little brief overview of the book and the author. So here we go. Okay, so today we're diving into a fascinating and deeply important book, Brain Energy by Dr. Christopher Palmer. This book really challenges many traditional ideas around mental health and invites us to think much more holistically about how the brain, body, metabolism, stress, lifestyle, and even purpose are all deeply interconnected. And honestly, this conversation feels incredibly timely right now. Beginning with the book overview, one of the central ideas in this book is that, mental health is far more connected to our daily lives than we possibly really realize. Dr. Palmer explores the idea that mental disorders may actually involve disruptions in metabolism and energy regulation within the brain itself. And what's powerful about this framework is that it expands the conversation beyond simply symptom management. It invites us to look more deeply at some of those core health pillars in lifestyle medicine that we talk about a lot, like sleep and food and stress and movement, even our nervous system regulation, inflammation, and in general, overall lifestyle patterns. And I think many people intuitively sense this already, but now we're going to dive deeply into how it impacts our thoughts and our associated behaviors. So as we take a look at the author, Christopher Palmer, MD, is a Harvard psychiatrist and researcher whose work focuses on the connection between metabolism and mental health. What makes his perspective especially compelling is that he brings together neuroscience, psychiatry, metabolism research, and clinical experience into one integrated model. And throughout the book, he repeatedly emphasizes something very important and hopeful. He says, if metabolism and brain energy can become disrupted, they may also be supported, restored, and strengthened. So to learn more about Dr. Palmer's work, you can visit his websites at chrispalmermd.com and brainenergy.com. So why does this book matter? Why are we talking about it today? Because, one reason this book really applies to our society is because so many of the rates of anxiety and depression, burnout, addiction, and emotional distress, they just continue to rise in the US and globally. As we discussed in our book last time on the anxious generation, right? And many people really just feel frustrated with systems that often focus primarily on symptoms rather than root causes. So he's taking the focus, looking at mental disorders of all times, going beyond systems, and proposing a more holistic, integrated, and multidisciplinary approach. Dr. Palmer isn't dismissing traditional psychiatry, but he's asking a much larger question. What if we're missing a deeper biological and lifestyle connection? So he looks at energy dysfunction in general and paves the pathway to hope. His theory suggests that many mental health challenges may involve underlying energy dysfunction within the brain itself. He calls it, his theory, brain energy. And that basically opens the door to much more integrated and hopeful approaches to healing. So there's so many ideas in this book. That we're going to just go through 3 that we're going to review, but recognizing the prevalence around the world. The World Health Organization in 2021 declared that 1.1 billion people around the world are experiencing some form of mental disorder. That's 1 in 7 people. And in the US, 2024 stat, 61.5 million US adults, or 23% of US adults, are facing some kind of mental disorder, mental health disorder. So that's why this topic matters. The big 3 ideas we're just going to look at today are looking at the broad idea of energy, how can we regulate it so we can get to human flourishing, and how we can create the conditions for how to truly thrive. So we're going to look at mental disorders, how they're all metabolic disorders. This is the one repeating message, that all mental disorders are metabolic disorders. That's our big idea number 1. Then we'll go into the need for a more integrative approach, including lifestyle habits. And then we'll wrap up with the idea of human flourishing, the mind-body health, how it also could be benefited by including purpose and connection. So let's check in with our hosts and guests and see what sparks our conversations to kick us off. All right, my friends, so that is setting the stage for this amazing book, Brain Energy. Again, chock full of research and also guiding us to what can we start with today. So who would love to share something that they took from that overview?
Well, I have a question I'd like Maricel to speak to. I have a feeling as an expert here, this will be helpful. And it's this notion of energy. I'm feeling, as I mentioned at the beginning, a sense of low energy. My energy level isn't where I want it to be. I can see it feeling off. I have a felt sense of energy, but I'm not sure what we're describing and what is the physiological experience of energy in the body that he is describing. If you could speak to that, I'd really appreciate getting a deeper understanding of that.
Our brain is the organ in our body that most requires energy, fuel, right? Glucose. Why? Because it's constantly working. It never stops. Even when we sleep, we're still active in our brain. And when we do not invest in proper fuel for our brains, we will start feeling things like mental fog, or, feeling tired, or you won't remember things, or, it impairs a lot the brain function, especially lifestyle things like, being sleep deprived chronically, being inflamed. Sometimes we have chronic inflammation for years and we get used to, we think that it's normal, but it's not. And it's sabotaging your access to good quality of energy in your brain.
Maricel, let's cut to you first. Were you familiar with this book? If not, just give us your lowdown on the general topic of his main statement that all mental health disorders are metabolic disorders. How does that land in your field of work?
it's known that, they call it all cognitive decline, chronic diseases like dementia, Alzheimer, Parkinson, the diabetes type 3. Why? Because they have the same common denominator, which is when we lack proper management of our glucose in blood, right? And I was going to give examples speaking about stress based on the last question that aligns totally with the first metabolic premise. It's like when we are in chronic stress, we are basically training our brain to not function in certain areas, because once you release cortisol, all your body wants to do is just be ready to escape, right? To fight or flight. So we don't have time to choose. We don't have the luxury to have special fuel in those areas of our brains that are not needed at the moment, right? Like what? Like discernment, like the analytical brain. All those parts of your brain are being neglected. Why? You just activate the reptile brain in your head because you just have to escape, right? And when you live like that for decades because you have chronic stress, you think that that's normal. And what you're doing is basically in the brain is the same thing as a muscle. You're getting atrophy of the muscles you're not using. Well, guess what happens in your brain, right? So that's why stress, and we will talk about lifestyle a little later, but coming back to the metabolic, that's just one example of how our physiology changes when we are exposed to different triggers.
Thank you. So basically, metabolism is sort of like resource management. And given all of the cellular functions that are happening all the time in our brain and our body, like you said, if stress or something comes in, it's going to demand more of those resources. So it's going to have to shortcut others, right? So that could affect how we show up with our focus or our energy because they're being diverted to other more urgent needs, right?
Though there's, I'm also curious that um, sugar is one of my favorite things, and it's actually a problem because it puts me above into the diabetic process area. And I'm thinking, so I guess I'm feeding my brain, but maybe I'm overfeeding it, or what do you say
Okay.
about?
Yes, then the other main thing is the source of energy, right? It's not like we can't do magic. I mean, if you're used to get carby foods all the time, you're elevating your insulins, and then you are depriving your cells to get access to good energy, which means sustainable, right? What we want is to have a constant flow of glucose in this case, because that's a favorite food for our brain. But the problem is that when we eat very carby foods or meals, we're in a rolling coaster that goes up and down. We release insulin, then we're going down, and our glucose moves like being a lot outside and then a lot inside and then a lot outside. And that constant movement of glucose in and outside our cells will eventually impair the quality of energy that we can extract from that and function.
Yeah. I love it. Oh my gosh. We're going to go so over time, people. This is going to be awesome because we need to pick your brain and ask all these questions. So let's go ahead and review the first big idea so we can set the context of what Dr. Palmer is really proclaiming here, that all mental disorders are metabolic disorders, connecting more of that mind-body science and the pathways to begin, as Maricel just mentioned, regulate and stabilize our energy. This is really the central thesis of the entire book. His focus that mental disorders are metabolic disorders. He argues that the brain is an incredibly energy demanding organ, representing about 2 to 3 pounds of our weight and demanding about 20 to 30% of our energy demands. And when the systems responsible for producing and regulating energy begin struggling, mental and emotional symptoms can emerge. So we're looking at brain health, connecting it to how we feel in our cells. And his main focus here is on mitochondria, the mighty mitochondria, fueling brain function as well as body function. These tiny structures, he goes into great detail, that are inside our cells and responsible, as we probably know, for producing energy. But what's fascinating is that it impacts metabolism and almost every other function in the body. So metabolism, of course, impacts mood and cognition, as we will go into. And the fascinating thing is that disruptions in mitochondrial functioning are increasingly linked to mental and physical disorders like depression, anxiety, as well as bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and cognitive decline. So what I really appreciate about this framework, it's totally connecting the mind and body. And it really helps us to reconnect the importance of the daily habits instead of treating the mind and the body completely as separate systems. So we'll be focusing largely on energy regulation, the importance of how that's shaping emotional well-being. And he poses the question, what happens, what changes when we see mental health through a whole system lens? And again, he says mental disorders, all of them are metabolic disorders of the brain. So let's revisit and let's begin to exchange some ideas around this big idea number one. So what do you think of that? All mental disorders are disorders of metabolism or mitochondrial function. Is that a new idea for anyone?
I can give an analogy
Yeah.
to make this easier to understand, because when you talk about metabolism, and it's kind of hard to see it, right? It's hard to visualize metabolism. But what I usually tell my clients is like energy in your body. Think about money. And that is the fluency in your system that allows you to think, to digest, to reproduce, to fight diseases. Like we have different systems in our body that need energy, that need the money to work, right? Inside ourselves, we have this little money machines maker that are called mitochondria, right? They produce the energy. And it's vital for our whole system to have good health in our mitochondria. Because if we don't create money, if we don't create the energy to sustain life, well, guess what? We're going to decline, right? And that's premature aging. And we don't even want to talk about that. So that's why it's so important to understand why metabolism reflects all these areas. It's because it's a system. It's the way it works is like we receive food, we process the food. In the journey of processing whatever the food is, we create energy. And then we have the last part of the metabolism, which is dealing with the waste of the metabolism. So it's a process, I will say 3 stages to create the money to sustain our life, our health. And we have to pay attention to each one of them. So when he says that all mental diseases are metabolic, it could be at the beginning, wrong food, wrong nutrition. It could be in the processing. Some people don't have the enzymes. Some people are doing keto. They don't even have the enzymes to break out and burn fat, for example, right? So we don't know until we test. And then the last part, dealing with waste of the metabolism. Simple, like, sleep deprivation. Only when we sleep, we deal with that. So it's complicated, but to make it simple, let's just see it as our ability to create the money, the metabolic money, fluency that we need to sustain our health.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And how he does it, how he shares his little story of what is metabolism and how is that different from mitochondria, because they're very connected. But he says metabolism is like a highway. So that's how all of the energy gets distributed. And there could be problems, like there could be crashes here, there could be stuck cars here, but it's a whole system. But the mitochondria, he says, are like a car. And then the little organelles could be like the driver. So it's like it's connected, and we have a part so we can get into the car and drive the car in that system. But it's kind of it's cute, right? How we can understand that metabolism, is like this energy. We use the mitochondria as like a little organelle in the cells. As what creates the ATP, that's the energy formation. We probably have learned that in school, that we get energy in the cells, but his whole research is focusing that it's much, much more. And that everything, if we can start to look at everything is connected, we can now looking at the root cause instead of just a symptom. There's a spectrum, and there's individuality. People with the same disorder might express it in a different way. And so their treatments will have to be different. And he goes into detail of how the system of hospitals and silos of physical well-being, like with doctors, and mental well-being with psychiatrists, they're so different. And the prescriptions they each individually prescribe for a certain disease or disorder might fight each other, might actually impact, disrupt our natural metabolism and the way the body brings us back to that homeostasis. So he's calling for different disciplines to come together to understand how everything is interconnected and impacting each other.
To that point, Maggie, what I notice is in medicine, typically you go to your doctor, they're going to try to attribute what organ is it that's the cause of like a fatigue factor. And this is a much more complex process. It's like, what are the elements that are affecting overall fatigue, and how does that, and it sounds to me like probably there's a lot of subtlety in how you even diagnose that and be aware of that. And most Western medicine physicians are not orienting to that. So you don't get that conversation. But that to me is an interesting conversation. How do we correlate the actual experience of fatigue, chronic fatigue, with what might be the actual operations of the body that need to be adjusted?
Mm.
Yeah, and I love the visual, right? It's like, oh, I'm feeling tired. Oh, it's like, how am I fueling my body? How am I resting it? How am I metabolizing the waste? And like Maricel said, and as we've talked about many times in these discussions, if we don't sleep, then the waste is not metabolized and gotten rid of from the brain. So we wake up with a full brain. What happens with a full brain? It's not going to be able to direct how the metabolism and everything is directed throughout the whole day. So it's about the feedback mechanisms.
I
And
think that's the thing that really sticks out to me, because like Maricel is talking about, the fuel is important, but I think in what the book is bringing to the table is that your internal biochemistry is important, but also your response to life can affect your metabolism. That psychological, social, existential stress can severely hamper your metabolism. You can have all the best fuel. And I've known people like this. I have met people who are like, I only eat organic, I only eat vegetarian, I only do this, I only do this, I do this. And then they spend the rest of their life stressed out of their freaking heads over politics or money or whatever it is. And that's just as bad for your metabolism. Well, at least I'm guessing. Maricel, am I right?
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Every thought that we allow to entertain is information that is regulating the expression of our genes and manifesting in our physiology in sickness or health. And I can share my personal story here is my mom. My mom is right now 88 years old. I just came from Argentina. I visited her over the last spring break. And she was one of those people, like you mentioned, she eat very clean. She was very active, always health. And I guess I'm in the health field because of her, because she was my icon of amazing health. And my grandma lived until she was 98 and she was perfect. And I thought, well, I have good genes. My mom will live long. But what happens is that she went through a difficult situation a few years ago, 3 years ago, and that triggered a cascade of events that are now she's dealing with Alzheimer. And
Ooh.
I was there 3 days and I had a few moments of connection with her, but all the other moments, she didn't know me. She didn't recognize, I brought one of my daughters. She couldn't recognize her. She would say the same things over and over. And I'm like, that's exactly what I do not want me to happen, right? I don't want to allow Alzheimer or any kind of dementia steal the presence that I want to be when my daughters are middle agers, right? I want to be there. And it became really personal because as a, my whole thing is about health span and live longer, healthier lives. So I'm taking it very seriously. And the only part that she didn't manage was her stress and anxiety.
Wow. I would say in response to that, first of all, I'm very moved by your situation with your mom. I'm sorry that that's happening, and I can only imagine what that's like. And it brings up for me the reflection that I have been living under more stress in the last, I would say, 2 or 3 years in this big transition I'm in than I can ever remember. And I'm experiencing a lot more challenges, in spite of the fact I have a very healthy lifestyle and I'm able to run and do things. But I'm feeling exactly what you're describing, and the stress factor is the most critical piece. And this is very helpful. It's prompting me to really want to go deeper into this book because I think it's really information we all need, and I certainly feel like I need.
Thank you, Marisa. It's a very powerful story, testimonial, and the why behind why you're so passionate and committed to helping others understand this, all the multiple factors, and the reason why we need more voices like you, more partners in this multidisciplinary approach. And that is what Dr. Palmer says, is we need people like physicians to work with coaches and therapists, and it's a team approach. Because let's face it, our lifestyles, our stress, the way we work with our beautiful technology, like we talked about last time on the anxious generation and our beautiful phones, they're all factors. And not only cause it, casual relationships, but they're causative now. So things are causing these diseases that we want to now be aware of. So with that, we want to welcome Urchana. Hello, Urchana. Welcome to our Cafecito Chat today.
Great to be here. Thank you so very much. This is amazing.
Do you want to share a quick, what you're interested to learn about this book or discuss before we move on to big idea number 2?
Yeah, thank you. Gordon, I likewise cannot get over this intuitive timing and then just the timeliness of all of this. I really cannot. Maggie and I were actually discussing that earlier. I was just blown away by this book, am blown away, and then on top of that, to learn that you met him. Oh my goodness. So I can't wait to hear more. Thank you so very much. And thank you, Maricel and Colin. Great seeing you. Great to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, he's from Harvard. He's part of the IOC teams of champions that are doing all this research and sharing it with not only the medical field, but coaches who are here to work with people to optimize their well-being. And here in Cafecito Chat, we share from our personal lived experiences, from what motivates us to live a full, whole, and optimized life. And for me, I always love to share the wisdom from ancient traditions that have guided us along the ways to live healthy. And when Dr. Palmer talks about metabolism and the mighty mitochondria, to me, it's Agni. So in Ayurveda, it's the flame of digestion of life. It's not, and in Ayurveda, these are thousands, millennia ago, that they understood the importance that we are a part of the system of nature, everything we put into our body, including our thoughts, what we see, what we touch, what we smell, all of our senses. We are digesting these inputs and it's being metabolized somehow in our brain and body complex, right? And how we then impact the world. So this system of how we are a co-creator in the quality of, as Mari said, the quality of energy. how we express ourselves. In Ayurveda, there's very specific guidelines on what is healthy that leads to ojas, sort of an essence of vibrancy and healthy in our cells and tissues and mind, and what is ama, an accumulation of those bits of stuff that's undigested and not able to be metabolized. So for those that are curious, learning about Ayurveda, we'll provide a QR code at the end where you can dive in and get a quiz, metabolic quiz, and understand more of what your unique metabolic type is, and just get curious about how you can step in and choose more healthier pathways with easy things every day. So with that, let's go ahead and expand the conversation into big idea number 2, which is lifestyle as brain medicine. Okay. Big idea number 2 is lifestyle as brain medicine, including all of the healthy pillars from lifestyle medicine, positive psychology, and new fields. So we want to look at sleep as a way to restore that healthy brain and body health. Of course, we're going to look at food as how it directly impacts our emotional and mental well-being. And then, as we've been talking about, stress, how that affects everything, including our metabolism, the systems, the quality of our nervous system, how we're approaching challenges or avoiding challenges in life. And what I love is his focus on bringing this connection of our daily habits and routines to the circadian rhythm, to those 2 pairs of 12 hours during the day, and how we match all of the different habits that we're doing, the sleeping, the eating, the moving, the connecting, the rest, and how all of these are shaping how our cells function, how they get developed, and how the wastes are processed. All of these impacting our metabolic and metabolism. So basically, we're looking at daily habits and how they're influencing our long-term health and resilience. So as always, we ask you to reflect and write down some key ideas. So reflecting down for yourself what daily habits most affect your energy, your mood, and emotional stability. Because these are what really shape our energy. Our culture, remember, often treats sleep almost like an inconvenience. So what other messages are we hearing or adhering to that we may not even know are impacting our daily habits? What can we look to as our foundational pillars of mental and emotional well-being? And this impacts not only our mind and body, but our pocketbooks. Globally, the economic burden of mental illness is projected to reach over 6 trillion by the year 2030. So Matthew Walker, in another book, quotes, "Sleep is the single most effective thing we can do to reset our brain and body health each day." I love this reminder because it really reframes what our society, how it views rest, instead of viewing it as just an option, but looking at is really essential and optimal. And many people today are really running chronically overstimulated and overtired without really fully realizing how deeply this impacts our mood, our cognition, our emotional regulation, and in the long run, our resilience. So let's dive into some conversations on what questions we have around lifestyle.
Well, I can share the experience that I'm having around managing the sleep cycle, particularly when I'm go and prepare for bed, and actually regulating that to basically a 10 o'clock to 10:30 sleep, and then rising around 6:30 to 7. So that seems to be the rhythm that works best, and how often find it difficult to keep that. So, but I'm getting some coaching and support around that. And really, even when I'm noticing it during the day and I'm feeling tired, instead of jumping into the next activity, I am now saying, I'm going to take a 20-minute nap. Now, I don't know if 20-minute naps are So it I feel like I have more energy and I'm more centered when I do that. I'm looking at Maricel's nods to see if I'm on track here. But that I do find that useful. Are my intuitions correct there?
It's totally correct. I was just in another event, and people were, the expert were trying to fix the lack of energy. And my approach was like, go take a nap. Listen to your body, go take a nap. And when you wake up from that, then let's talk, right? Because otherwise you're like drugging and you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. What is that I came here for? I mean, you're totally not efficient with anything. So take first care of what is needed now. Take your nap. 20 minutes, perfectly fine. I wouldn't do more than, 40, 45 minutes because that could impair your night sleep.
Oh, good point. Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, but 20 minutes totally fine.
Good.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's Matthew Walker or another author that says take a napitation. Meaning you can drink a cup of coffee and take a 20-minute nap because by the time the caffeine kicks in, you're ready to go. And so that's kind of funny, but it's like start with where you're at, know where you want to go and how to regulate. Like Maricel said, it's about regulating and having that consistent set of energy and avoiding the spikes with the healthy sources of energy.
Yeah, if I may, the other thing I want to add is you talk about circadian rhythm. And Gordon, you mentioned trying to keep consistency in the time you go to bed, time you wake up. And that is incredibly important because we train our system. And the more data points we have, like I go to bed at the same time, I wake up at the same, it's like giving our system the relief from having to adjust to new variables. It's like when you wake up in the morning and you don't know how to wear, especially women, right? Matching outfit and let's see what matches with my. No, it's like it's the black outfit. That's circadian rhythm for our system. Don't worry about that because we're gonna wear the same thing over every day. So if you can give that to your metabolism, same time you eat, same time you go to bed, same time you wake up, same time you go to use the bathroom, same time you finish drinking the first 32 ounces of water, the more routines we create around our lifestyle, the easier it will be for our system to thrive.
Thank you for bringing that up. And the author points to the fact that, let's face it, our brain is lazy. Our brain wants to conserve energy. So it wants to conserve energy. So it wants us to do habitual things. And it's up to us to discern what is actually healthy instead of like being unconsciously doing things that may be sabotaging our energy. So, as we said, the brain really has a huge energy demand. And if we do not feed it, so if you're skipping meals, you may be putting yourself in a situation where your brain cannot have the energy necessary to process and to direct all the metabolic processes that are happening in the body, much less what we're trying to do with our focus or attention. So healthy glucose is another term that we can look to as to why food is such an important component of this big idea number 2. Lifestyle, food, what is real food? What is really healthy food for you? We're all unique. And whether we're diabetic, we're pre-diabetic, or we're facing other sorts of metabolic imbalances, these can all shape the different ways we can define healthy diet.
I'm also thinking that this is for our viewers, or that the discussions we're having are actually reinforcing each other. We had one on habits about a month ago that really spoke to that, and then the idea of getting efficiency so that you have this, so you don't have to put extra brain energy and stuff, also makes sense now as we're seeing this as well. So just a reminder that this ongoing conversation has got a lot of continuity to it, actually.
Yeah, the habit loop is important to understand, especially when we get to addictions and how the brain processes the extra steps in the addiction cycle, particularly with alcoholism, and how the brain actually, he talks about this in one of the chapters on addictions, where The brain actually processes energy differently when someone is drinking a lot, binge drinking, or an alcoholic. So they actually pull, they're ready, the brain is set, it's expecting alcohol, like Maricela was just saying, right? So when we're feeding it a lot of alcohol, the brain is now expecting to receive its energy source from alcohol. So it's actually going to crave that because that's what's going to feed that habit loop. And it will not process the other forms of glucose that can enter into the brain. So it's actually, you're starved of nutrients or energy for the brain. And that's why it's such a harsh transition to try to detox. That was huge to learn about that the brain is now looking for that specific type of energy. That's why it's so hard to detox. It's literally looking for a different source of food.
It's also fascinating how all of this, for me at least, speaks to design, right? Individual design, and I actually was going to ask Marisol, and I know when you were speaking earlier, Maggie, about Ayurveda, how much does individual biochemistry, I mean, knowing self-knowledge rather, classification, and then knowing what serves best, in terms of systemically what works best for you. What are some pathways to self-knowledge as far as, metabolic profile, just again, self-knowledge that can by design then help you, navigate a metabolic reset, retraining, right? Recognition.
My approach is the opposite of, cookie cutter thing. My approach is really respecting bio individuality. And that is even different for the same person 3 months from now, right? So it's really unique and it changes, it flows as all biological systems. I have a program. Ironically, the name of my program is Metabolic Reset. And in 1 month, I help my clients using a continuous glucose monitor. And this is for everybody. This is not prescribed. Any person, adult, 18 and up, it's over the counter. We observe how your body responds to stress, to foods, different type of foods, to exercise, so that you learn how your body receives the triggers and how your body regulates sugar, glucose during the whole day. And then because they share the information with me, I have my clinic, my dashboard. Then when we meet, we can see and we can identify those glucose spikes that were like, wait, what happened? You didn't eat anything. How come you have that big spike? And then they will say something, oh, I had a fight with my husband. All right, so next time, you're going to be a little smarter you're going to choose your battles. Don't do that before bedtime because that's creating inflammation as you sleep, right? And she was doing a fasting, for example. Or you learn how your body responds and you finally get the tools in real time to see what's happening. So that's my approach to what your question was, the pathways, is to have visual experience, data that can help you understand what's going on. And then as you start changing things, you tweak the way you eat, the amounts, the quality, the frequency, the time before bedtime. All of those things are playing a huge role in the way your body is regulating glucose over time. So once you learn that, you get out of my program learning how your unique body works. Like I compete with my husband and I'm like, okay, he can do oatmeal, I can't. That spikes me. But I can do sometimes, sweet potato. He cannot do that. That spikes him. So each person is different. And it's important at least 1 month in your life just to learn how your body responds. And then you sustain that, then you keep, because once you learn, you cannot unlearn.
That's what we say.
That's incredible. Thank you.
A mind who has been expanded with new knowledge from books. It can't go back to its old shape. And that's what we do here, right? We go through the ideas and then we look at it. How is this showing up in my life? And so many of these books are pointing to this individuality, recognizing we're humans, but we go into, yes, we have the genes and the genetics and the DNA, but our full expression, our gene expression is now, we are learning, are so impacted by the everyday choices we make. So having, our own self-care, healthcare partners like Maricel to help guide and answer those questions of who am I as my metabolic profile and what foods are friendly to me. Just because it's a salad doesn't mean it's going to be nourishing for you. Just because it's a sweet potato, it's like doesn't mean it's going to work for your body. So I love that we're sharing these real life experiences and to honor that, our unique pathways are unique to each of us. Okay. Moving on to big idea number 3 around the idea of human flourishing, including and folding in the idea of purpose, connection, and why this matters. So, humans, Dr. Palmer says, we need meaningful connections because our health doesn't just stop at biology alone. He explores all the importance around having a purpose, how this supports our emotional health and resilience, and the impact of chronic stress, as we've been discussing, how that disrupts the healthy self functioning of not just in our body, but in our brain. And the importance of environment, how it helps to shape the gene expression and how it helps and supports our health or hinders as an obstacle to our health. And the overall idea of supporting whole person well-being requires us having supportive communities, being in our homes, in our workplaces, and in our general communities. So this book deeply connects all of these factors, and that's what we love to explore here because flourishing isn't just about reducing symptoms. We look at it, it's about that feeling of connectedness, having that sense of feeling energized, and now really embodying that sense of what am I here to do, my purpose, and how can we create these environments that really support the full, healthy human functioning. So I love this quote by Alexander Den Heijer. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. I just love that quote. It really does point to that the importance of the individuality and the container in which we are planted.
For me, I think it points to the longest study in history, or whatever they call it, the Harvard study of the humans that started taking an assessment like 80 years ago or something. I don't know. It may not be, but it's at least 60 years. And what they're finding is that longevity is more associated with deep, meaningful relationships than almost all the other factors. And I think it points to logotherapy or Viktor Frankl. The meaning that we assign can get us through things. I can remember reading that book and him talking about that bowl of horribleness that he had, that he prayed over and gave gratitude for, where I'm sure myself and others would be like, "This is horrible, man." This, but the internal alteration of the state that gratitude gives us, I think this is what this is pointing to. And I think Maricel has also clearly stated how, yes, it's the biochemistry of our fuel intake and all that stuff, but I loved how I didn't know this, but an argument with your spouse can spike your glucose. Who knew?
Yeah, this is a field that fascinates me. And we're talking here about epigenetics and how the lifestyle, how the environment for that flower will make her bloom or not, right? And connection, joy, purpose is something that we see in the blue zones. You talk about longevity. And one of the common denominators is that they have communities, right? They have someone who they can share with whatever happened to them, right? A friend, a community, people who will cry with you, people who will laugh, who will dance and play. And that is purpose. That builds a foundation why you're eating healthy today, why you're not having a second glass of wine, why you are stopping binging Netflix tonight, right? That's why you do it, to get there and to celebrate. If you don't have that, if you are, and that's another factor that is hidden, because most people in cultures like ours here in the US, that is very individualistic, are alone, right? I come from Argentina, where we were the kids of all moms at the park, and it was community and people. And we would, I was raised in a small town where people asking for addresses or direction, it would be like, go to the house that has a big dog, and then it's by the one with the gray gate, whatever, right? So that's the experience that I have. And people now have friends when as they grow older. My mom is there. She went back to my hometown, and I feel happy in that sense that she has the support of the community. But here in the US, it's more like people are lonely, and we need to, take action. We need to prevent that, because that is a big deal of why and how we can be one of those centenarian citizens of a blue zone place in the world, right? That's very important for us to start cultivating now.
Yep. Thanks for bringing that
Thanks.
up about the blue zones. And again, with American College of Lifestyle Medicine, this is interestingly enough, they are updating one of their pillars to now focus on how meaning and purpose are impacting our health. And so they're including this idea of horizontal connection. So the benefits of being connected to ourselves and nature outside of ourselves. And then they introduce the concept of sort of vertical connection. So whether we're practicing spirituality or connection to a higher source, and how that's connecting us to a higher sense of meaning and purpose in life, all of these, the horizontal and the vertical expressions or connections to meaning and purpose, enliven and direct us to how we want to wake up with a sense of zest and vitality. So this is really becoming a big field in positive psychology and lifestyle medicine.
Marisol, thank you for sharing your story about your mom. I was just this morning, in fact, texting my parents because in our family group chat, I saw pictures of this past weekend celebration, Mother's Day celebration. I saw my beaming smiles, and I responded and thanked my brother for sharing those pictures. And I was just thrilled to see that they were at their community center. They were participating, enjoying, and I shared the fact that while there's a part of me selfishly that wants them to come down here and possibly live in SoCal, sunny SoCal with the beach right behind me. No, not really, but the truth is I can't duplicate that. I cannot have that enriching environment that they are really have been cultivating, that systems in place, community centers have been cultivating. And I was so grateful, and I just wanted to celebrate that with them this morning, that I'm so thrilled for them that they're flourishing. And that's really essentially what I want. So as much as personally it would be great to have my parents, for all the sun in SoCal, although today is not sunny, but for all the sun, that meaningful purposefulness, the beauty of that, it was just absolutely, I was overjoyed to see it. And so I totally appreciate what you're saying.
Well, let's move on to recap the 3 big ideas for today. So one thing I appreciate about this book is that it ultimately returns us to looking at the foundations, right? The foundational habits that all humans need. And we're looking at today at the big 3 ideas of optimizing our energy, for all cellular functions, mind and body. And we also looked at supporting emotional regulation to find that happy medium to support our energy and healthy choices throughout the day. And then lastly, we were just exploring cultivating a sense of purpose and the powerful health benefits around connection. So these small shifts in daily habits and how they can help us to transform how we not only feel, but how we make those healthier choices to function better. So our bonus tip for today comes straight from the book, Brain Energy, and it's looking at giving some tips on improving that gut microbiome. And he said, again, you can choose. You can start your own lifestyle interventions, working with your physicians if you're on medications or right now, having any kind of mental diseases or disorders. And he says, just start with assessing any of these, starting with one of these, and explore it for a week or two and assess how you're feeling, any changes that you're noticing in your thoughts, emotions, or choices. And then after a week or two, adding one more. So folding it in like a healthy recipe to explore new and customized pathways for our unique pathways towards whole person health and wellness. So hope you can take a snapshot of that and get excited about identifying just one way to begin to shift how you might begin to feel better, have more energy, and support that healthy mind-body connection. So to close today, we'd love to encourage everyone to make health, mental health, a priority. Dr. Palmer really does encourage us to speak out with our family and our community and explore all the different ways that we can be active participants in our health and well-being. As we wrap up, we always want to encourage everyone to really just pick one idea, something that landed with you. So I'd love to just go around the room and see what might have stood out for each of you. It could be an idea, an insight, or even something that you might be interested in exploring in your personal health and well-being practices.
I guess for me, I'm still kind of processing the idea that, it makes total sense when you get down to it, that metabolism is the driver of mental health. It makes total sense. When I first read it, I was questioning a bit because initially I was interpreting it as my internal electrobiochemistry was the sole driver, and per the input of Maricel and what the book has shared, it's the combination. It's the fuel I provide, simultaneously my own internal processes in response to my environment. And I think that's, for me, the thing that I'm really focusing on is because none of us can really change the current socio-political environment of the world, economic, all those things. We can't change that per se for the 8 billion people on the earth. But what I do have power to do is change my response to it. And so the combination of getting the clean energy fuel necessary to let my my biochemistry metabolism process, but also how I process the intake of the energies of mental and emotional stressors that are out there. It's a holistic approach, and it makes sense that my mental health is completely dependent on what I take in, food, emotion, mental, all that stuff. It's powerful.
You said it's
Yeah.
so important. My addition there is, that's a clear evidence of awareness, and that's why we need to grow more awareness and empower people to really understand that we are our own makers of our own health, right? Nobody else will sleep for you. No one will defend your interest but you, better than you. So, start making those decisions and take action today. Don't wait, because every single decision you make and you put together and you do it is information that your metabolism is reading to get improved day and day and every step of your whole life. So do it and do it now.
I'm still processing it. What I am, at the same time, what I am enlivened by is the fact that knowledge, right, of that is creating optimism. For me, it's just optimism. And I'm optimistic because I can, as Marisol pointed out, by design, choose a path that is going to help me, function optimally. So, so thank you so very much again for sharing this book. I can't wait to, get to reread it. And even including, earlier what we were talking about in terms of, and frankly, specifically about inflammation, loneliness contributing, to inflammation. Again, direct processes. For me, that was profoundly, I guess, alarming, but at the same time, profoundly, again, I don't know what the exact word is, but I think in some ways it was empowering. It was really empowering. I found this book to be very empowering.
For sharing that. And yes, so Brain Energy has just been, again, a chock full scientific research-based book. It can be life-changing, especially if you know anyone who is suffering from mental disorders, diseases, or lifestyle-based diseases. We really encourage you to check out the book, share it with someone, and then, as we love to work here, is share it with someone, talk with someone about these ideas, because one book may change a life. And that's how we love to meet to talk about the books. That's what brings the magic of the wisdom and the ideas from the book. I want to thank you all so much for being part of today's Cafecito Chat. And a special thank you to Maricel for joining our thoughtful little motley crew today. We're so happy to have had you join us, and you're welcome to join us anytime. And if this conversation resonates with you, we of course invite you to subscribe and share and join us again as we continue exploring books and ideas that support more intentional, meaningful, and flourishing ways to live. And join us next week as our conversation continues to focus on mental health with our unique look on mental fitness with this book, review of the book Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Chamine. So until next time, take a moment to pause, not to stop, but to pivot toward what matters. Thanks so much. We'll see you guys later.